once again for Uncle Matt's bedtime story.
Hello, everybody. It's Uncle Matt, and I'm here to read you a bedtime story. Well, today the story's a little bit dull, a little boring, maybe. You can decide that, because we are going to meet the Dullards, and we're reading the extra boring edition. Written by Sara Pennypacker and illustrated by Daniel Salmieri. This story was copyright. Yawn. 2015. Wow. Meet the Dullards. Here we go. One day, Mr. and Mrs. Dullard received quite a nasty surprise. The Dullards collected the books and handed their children some nice blank paper to read instead. They then left the room to discuss the problem in private. This was not the first time their children had given them a shock. Last week they had asked to go to school, and just the day before, Mr. Dullard had caught them trying to play outside. Mrs. Dullard shook her head sadly. Where did we go wrong? Now, Mr. Dullard comforted his wife. It can't be our fault. We're perfectly dull. Perhaps it's this place, he said. Last fall, remember, some leaves turned color? And now this. He pointed to an upsetting commotion in the driveway. There is never a dull moment. Do you see what the dull moment is? Oh, dear. You may be right. It's like a circus around here, Mrs. Dullard agreed. This is no place to raise Blanda, Borley, and Little Dud. So the Dullards packed up their 3 dull children and all their dull things and moved. Just as they had brought the last box into their new home, a lady came to the door. Welcome to the neighborhood, she said. I baked you an applesauce cake. Please don't use exclamation marks in front of our children, said Mrs. Dullard. Smooth or chunky applesauce? Asked Mr. Dullard. Chunks are so unpredictable, so nerve-wracking. I'm sorry, said the neighbor lady. It was chunky. Goodbye, said the Dullards, shutting the door. Well, I never, they heard the neighbor lady muttering as she carried her cake away. Well, we never either, said Mr. Dullard. That's how we keep our family so dull. You children need to calm down after all that excitement, said Mrs. Dullard. Go watch the television. Exciting. Mr. and Mrs. Dullard finished unpacking all their dull things. This place feels more boring already, said Mr. Dullard. But then... On the way to the paint store, the Dullards spotted an ice cream stand. Mr. Dullard ordered their usual 5 vanilla cones, please. Hold the cones and extract the vanilla. But all that would be left is plain ice cream, the clerk said. Yes, that's correct, said Mr. Dullard. At the paint store, Mr. Dullard suggested a medium gray. Too risky, Mrs. Dullard decided. Gray is the color of highways, and highways could make the children think about going somewhere. How about beige? Out of the question, said her husband. Beige reminds me of clay. The children might think of that, and he put his hand to his heart. Want to make something. In the end, they told the clerk to mix the gray paint and the beige paint together, and the new color was indeed perfectly dull, like oatmeal left in the pot. After they finished painting the room, Mr. and Mrs. Dullard tried not to look at the walls, but it was no use. They were completely mesmerized. All day long the Dullards watched the paint dry. Some excitement there. Finally, Mr. Dullard tore his gaze away. I think, he began. Mrs. Dullard shook her head. No thinking, she reminded her husband. It sets up a bad example for the children. And speaking of the children, where are they? Maybe they're going to that neighbor for that chunky applesauce cake. Or maybe not. I can't imagine what came over them, Mr. Dullard said as he herded the children safely back inside. Perhaps it's this new home. It's terribly exciting. You may be right. It's like a circus around here, Mrs. Dullard agreed. This is no place to raise Blanda, Borley, and little Dud. So the Dullards packed up their 3 dull children and all of their dull things. And moved back. That night, Mr. and Mrs. Dullard fell asleep right away, secure in the knowledge that their children would be perfect bores. The end. Oh, man. Meet the Dullards. The extra boring edition. Well, that's all the time we have for Uncle Matt's bedtime story. I hope you were bored with that story, and I'll see you next time. Bye.